Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Mr. Gene Brock today. Gene is an anthropologist and started the Kentucky Center for Bigfoot Research. Saw him post a few things, I believe it was over on Facebook, about some things he's experienced. So reached out to him to see if he would come on the show to share what he's experienced, and thankfully he was good to go for that. And Gene, welcome to the show today. How's it going, man?
I'm good, Jeremiah. Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.
Oh, absolutely. And likewise as well. But, you know, I love talking to people from the state of Kentucky. You guys have some wild stuff going on down there when it comes to Bigfoot. So I've been looking forward to this one. But, you know, Gene, when I have individuals on that, you know, they kind of have a little bit of a research background, they're out in the field going after it. You know, I'd love to hear what first got you into the Bigfoot field to begin with.
Well, it's a pretty long, drawn out story. Basically, my encounter I had as a teenager kind of reshaped my whole future plans, and I wound up going to Eastern Kentucky University and majoring in anthropology, just basically so I could take all the primate classes. Of course, there's not many jobs here in Kentucky to deal with primates, so I specialized in archaeology, and that puts me in a lot of remote places doing field work for that. And I guess I'm lucky I get to do Bigfoot research at night in all these different locations that I've been in during the day and looked around. I can go back at night when it's my free time and do field work if I want to.
You must have had just a wild encounter for that to put you on that life path of where you're taking everything and going after this 100%.
Yeah, it was, looking back on it, it was a whole lot more dramatic than it was at the time. Because at the time I wasn't quite sure exactly what I had saw, which will be evident when I recall my encounter with you, because it wasn't the standard 8 foot tall upright walking creature. But yeah, it was pretty intense in the moment, but it didn't freak me out at the time. But it did spark a curiosity in me that I was never able to put out.
Well, Gene, I would say, if you wouldn't mind, you feel free to take us back to that time in your few years ago where you had that encounter that shaped the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's been more than a few years ago. To start with, my first knowledge of Sasquatch was my father was a long haul truck driver, and he was taking a load down south, I think to Florida, and was on his way back home to Kentucky, and they were climbing Jellico Mountain near an exit called Stinking Creek, which is a exit that ironically goes to a gravel road. I was told at one point in time there was some military activity there, but there was nothing at this exit. And the guy that was following my father got on the radio and was telling people that a Bigfoot had crossed the road in front of him, so directly behind my father's truck. And he even hollered at the people that were heading north. So he started hollering at the people that were heading south to watch that thing that was running across the interstate. Well, of course, they got to riding him pretty hard. And he passed my father going down the hill and got off on the exit at the bottom of the mountain. And my dad pulled in behind him and was talking to him. And he said that the guy was white as a ghost and shaking. And he asked him, he said, "Are you sure it wasn't a black bear that you saw? Because there is bears in that area." And he said, "Man, I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I know what a bear looks like. And a bear don't cross the interstate in 3 steps." So that was my first introduction into Sasquatch. So that happened when I was probably about 8 or 9. So fast forward to 1986, maybe 85. I was 13 or 14 years old. We were hunting in West Kentucky. We were hunting on reclaimed coal mine property owned by Peabody Coal Company. We were in between Central City and Madisonville. So this actually happened on the Muhlenberg-Hopkins County line area. And it was the 3rd week of November, if I remember correctly, because we were deer hunting. I was standing in a large open field. My father had went down this holler to the west of me. And I was standing there, and I was actually looking to the northwest, I believe it was, and I heard my dad shoot. He had been gone for an hour or so. This was 4:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He had been gone for an hour or so, and I heard him shoot 3 times. And it wasn't the rapid fire distress signal that you can do with a gun. It wasn't 3 very rapid shots. It was 3 deliberately aimed shots. And I knew it was my dad because I'd hunted with him my whole life. I knew what the gun sounded like. And what struck me as funny is my father was the type of hunter that when he pulled the trigger, there was 1 shot and the deer was down. But this was bang, 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 very deliberate and very aimed shooting. So I walked over to the mouth of the holler. Now this holler was in the middle of the cold field, but it had never been dug out. So it was old growth forest. And it was fairly open. You could see for hundreds of yards down it, except at the very bottom of the holler where there was a wet season creek when a spring got up and it run through there. So there was a lot of thick, dense vegetation right there. So I'd went over to the mouth of the holler so I could see down to see if there was any deer coming. And I was standing there and I wasn't seeing anything, but I started hearing voices. And I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it was definitely 2 people talking to each other. So I thought, okay, Dad's down there with somebody. They've probably got a deer down. I'll go down and see if I can help. So I started walking down the holler, and I'd probably got 1,000 yards down in it, something like that. I don't know how far it was, but like I said, you could see for a long time, and I heard no noises. There was nothing running through the woods or anything like that. But all at once, when I got down to the thick area, about 50 or 60 yards from it, 2 animals busted out of the brush, and they were at a dead run, and they were running straight at me. And they were, like I said, it was not the standard Bigfoot sighting. These animals were on all 4s. They were doing, at the time, it reminded me of what I'd seen on TV of great apes doing. But now I know that they were knuckle walking is what they were. The front arms were longer than the rear because their their butts were lower than their shoulders were, and the knees kind of went on the legs. The knees kind of were up toward the spine and then went back down, kind of like a track person would be right before they take off. The knees were bent, and they were running wide open at me. And in my 14-year-old mind, all I knew was that this was some animal I couldn't identify and it needed to die because it was running right at me. And so I yanked my gun up and I shot a couple of times. I don't even think I aimed at them. I just pointed the gun at them because it was very much a surprise and it was happening very quick. And right after the first or second shot, I don't remember which one, but right after I shot, there was a big noise right behind me. And I remember thinking, they've got me surrounded. So I spun around and it was a squirrel going up a hickory tree right behind me, making all kinds of racket. So I spun back around to the danger that I knew was coming. And these creatures were so fast that they had already crossed back through the thick stuff and were halfway up the other side of the holler. And I shot one or two more times. I shot a total of 3 times. I just can't remember if it was 2 shots before the squirrel or 2 shots after, but I never touched a hair on either one of them. And what I saw there, the hair on them was kind of reddish brown. It was 3 to 4 inches long, 3.5 inches long. No snout like a bear or a canine creature. The face appeared to be flat. I saw no visible ears. Nothing really stood out at the time except for the way that they were moving and the fact that I did not know what they were. I've tried to replay it in my head to pick out more details, and there's certain things that I think I saw, but I don't want to say yes, I saw that, because I don't know how much of my memory I'm interjecting current knowledge into, you know what I mean? So I try to avoid getting into too much detail because I really didn't see a lot of detail. Just the fact that they were in a quadruped stance, they were running fast, they had the long hair, they appeared to be great apes knuckle walking. So what I've come to theorize in years later is that these were 2 juvenile Sasquatches that I saw. Now, when they charged out of the brush, they started hollering back and forth at each other with each other when they saw me. And I can tell that the voices that I heard were these 2 things chattering back and forth to each other after my father shot at them. Or after let me back up. When I talked to my father when we got back to camp, he saw these 2 things too, and that's what he was shooting at. So after he shot at them and I moved over to the edge of the field and I heard the voices, it was these 2 things chattering back and forth to each other as they come up the holler. My dad saw them at about 100 yards from him. He got maybe a better look at them, but it was at a longer distance. So his detail pretty much matched mine. But it is what he saw and what he was actually shooting at. We had tried for a long time to convince ourselves that it was some kind of canine or a wolf that we saw, but I think we all knew in the back of our minds that it was not. We wasn't quite sure what it was. I had suspicions because I believed in Bigfoot from the get-go. And we've discussed it several times with other guys that we've hunted with, and and we're all kind of on board with that. We hunted there we still hunt there, but for a good 20 years, we were down there at least 5 or 6 times a year, 5 or 6 weekends a year, deer hunting. And we've heard strange howls, screams, things that we now know were wood knocks and rocks being banged together. Because we'd just be going through the woods, and all at once there'd sound like somebody smacked a tree with a baseball bat. And we never knew what it was. We'd be sitting there deer hunting, all at once you'd hear rocks, plainly rocks being banged together. And we never could figure out what it was. We always said, well, we had heard some coons banging on something, breaking it open to eat or whatever. But we now know that it was rock clacking and tree knocks. And there's a huge coyote population down there, so we would always hear coyotes, and they would run in a pack and they would start singing, and every now and then there would be just something that sounded like the king coyote out of the bunch of them. It was always a lot bigger and a lot deeper, and it rung out a lot longer. So I believe that was definitely Sasquatch howls. And if you check the sites that do report cataloging, the surrounding counties of Muhlenberg and Muhlenberg County, there is about 10 different reports that happened within 3 miles of where my sighting took place at. So it's definitely a hot area, or was a hot area anyway. When we were hunting there, it was 62,000 acres of reclaimed coal land that nobody ever did anything on. It's dwindled down a little bit. They've sold some of it. I think it's down to about 40,000 acres now, I believe is what it is.
That is an absolutely incredible first foray into the Bigfoot world. That's incredible. Did they have any emotion to their face from what you remember as they were rushing towards you?
Not that I really recall. I've been asked if I thought that they were charging me particularly, and I think I just happened to be in their way, because I didn't, even though I discharged my weapon, I really didn't have a sense of being threatened. It was more, I need to kill this to figure out what it is kind of thing, which I know in this modern day and times, that's probably a kind of a weird thing, but you got to remember this was the mid 80s, and I was 13, 14 years old. If I couldn't identify something, I needed to be able to, and shooting one of these was the only way I knew how to identify it. But no, there was no emotion on the face that I saw. The chattering when they charged out, they were not making any noise. They were just running. I don't know if they had run up that creek that was there because it was dry at the time and just didn't make noise, or if they were sitting there and then took off when they saw me. Of course, that goes against I was in their way, because they would have run at me if that was the case. But there was no obvious threat. There was no snarling of teeth or anything like that. But the sounds they were making became more like, when I first heard them in the field, it was more of a speech cadence. It was more of a communication type thing. I hate to use the word language, but it had that rhythm to it. Now, when they come out of the brush running at me, it sounded more like chimpanzees would when you startled them, just with all the shrieks and just the vocalizations. There was no cadence to it. No, I'm trying to say something. It was more of a startle and surprise kind of a cadence. Just like you had walked into a jungle area where there was chimps and somehow or another you snuck in on them and all at once they saw you and they started doing their vocals. The one thing that I always wondered was, were they just hollering because I surprised them, or were they hollering for mom and dad that I never saw? And that part of it, that's the creepiest part, or the most worrisome part. Was there a large male or female nearby that I never saw? And what would have happened had my bullet actually connected with one?
Oh, absolutely.
Because these creatures, I mean, they were not small by no means. I think that they were probably 4 foot at the front shoulder. And based on some of the large breed dogs that I've encountered since then, I would say they were pushing 180 pounds. They were substantial creatures. They were not babies by no means. They could have just been teenagers out on a romp, you know. So I can't guess at an age, obviously, because we don't have a specimen that we can study to that degree. But I get the feeling that they were juveniles. They definitely weren't babies, and they definitely weren't adults. So that's the only category left.
That's some really, really interesting stuff. Heading up the center there, I'm sure you've heard tons of evidence over the years. What you heard that day when they were making sounded some sort of language back and forth, have you heard that at any other time in any recording?
Yeah, the Sahara sounds. The first time I heard them, when I was standing in the field, I mean, it was not as plain as what you hear on the Sahara sounds, but it had that cadence to it. The sound of intentional vocals. That's why I thought it was people talking. And I could tell that there was 2 individuals, because one would start a little bit before the other one would finish. So I knew it was 2 people, or 2 individuals talking. Now, when they when they busted out of the brush, there's a spot on these Sierra sounds, and I don't know which one it is, but it's the rapid speaking. Not anything that sounded remotely human, but more along the chimpanzee line. But one of the sounds on the Sierra sounds is very reminiscent to that portion as well. So you got the one that sounds very chimpish on the Sierra sounds that sounded exactly like what they were doing. And then you have the long range sounds that I heard that had the same cadence as the Sierra sounds, but not the bad Japanese translated movie sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I definitely know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you?
I mean, that's why they call it samurai.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's for a person that's their first time hearing that description, they might be confused, but I definitely know what you mean.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered looking into having something maybe like hypnotherapy to experience that time again, or is that something you might not want to get into?
I have thought about that, but I've thought about it more for a second experience that I had down there, which I have no indication that it has anything at all to do with the Sasquatch. But I was down there hunting, and this was several years later, 6, 7, maybe even 10 years later. I was on the edge of another great big field, because that's the way this area is laid out. You got these great big huge strip mine sections that are now fields, and they're overgrown with we call it tumbleweed is what we called it, but it's real thick brush stuff, and surrounded by where they dumped the spoils at, which grew pine trees and serviceberry trees and just kind of junk trees, locusts and things like that. So I'm standing in one, and it's kind of an old dirt path of a road that separates the field from the trees. And about 150 yards from me, a fairly good sized buck deer runs out of the woods, and it's running hard. It looks kind of frothy, like a horse does after it's run extensively. It's got its tongue hanging out of its mouth, and I can hear something else further in the woods. And I'm thinking, well, what would be making a deer of this size run? Because it was a fairly good deer. I mean, I had 100% intentions of killing this deer. And I thought, well, the only thing that would make a deer this big run would be another bigger deer. So I was watching this deer and waiting for the other one to come charging out of the woods, because I figured that they'd been down there and had been in a fight. And I'm sitting there watching that deer come closer and closer. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I can hear something breathing. And it just sounded like heavy breaths, just like it was somebody was standing beside me totally out of breath. And this deer is getting closer and closer, and the other deer has not come out of the woods yet. And the original deer is now about 40 yards from where I'm standing in this little group of trees. And then the very next thing that I consciously remember is the deer is suddenly behind me. It has run past me. So it went from 40 yards in front of me to about 10 yards behind me in the blink of an eye, or what I can imagine to be a blink of an eye. It's almost like, and this is getting a little wooish, but it's almost like my brain saw something in those few seconds that it doesn't want me to see. It's almost like I have a lapse in time. I don't remember what happened in the length of time it took that deer to cover that 50 yards, 40 in front of me and 10 behind me. So if I was to consider going under hypnosis, it would be to find out what happened in that little short period of time, as to why I can't remember what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be probably worth considering. I mean, I think sometimes there's things that happen in our lives, and our brain kind of, in order for us not, I don't know, I think it's maybe even a trauma response where, sometimes it maybe a little bit gets erased, so we don't have to replay that part, and we can just keep on living, you know what I mean? And I think it'd be interesting if you could find out what's under that little erased part, but I'm not sure what you would find either. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's kind of what I've always felt like it was, that my brain saw something that was so traumatic to it that it just erased that small section of my memory.
Hmm.
And, because like I said, when I encountered the small ones, it wasn't a traumatic event at that moment. Later, when I think back on it and I think about the possibility of there being a bigger one there or something like that, then yeah, it gets a little bit unnerving. Until just, I think about 3 years ago, that was the first time I had stepped foot back in that holler. And that's been, well, I'm 53, so that was 40 years ago. And I'd never stepped foot back in that holler until just a couple of years ago. So, after the fact, it was traumatic, but during the event, it wasn't that traumatic. But whatever happened in those few seconds with that one deer encounter, I can't account for, and I don't know why. And I've talked about that before, and everybody wants me to say, oh, it was woo type stuff, and I'm a 100% flesh and blood guy, but I do not discount anybody's woo experience. That's what happened to them, and that's great. I'll take all the information I can get from all that. Maybe something like that will happen to me sometime. But on that second experience where I lost a few seconds of time, I have nothing to say that there was a Sasquatch involved in that. I saw nothing that, puts one on the scene. I heard stuff, but, it could have been another big deer coming through the woods. But for some reason, I do have that lapse in my memory. But I can't call it woo stuff, because I can't call it Bigfoot woo stuff, because there was not a Bigfoot present. If that makes sense. I've tried to explain that before, but I don't know I always convey what I'm actually trying to say.
No, it makes sense. It did happen in a similar area as to where your other encounter happened, though. Like, it wasn't too far away, it sounds like.
Oh no, it was still on Peabody, still in the
Right.
general area. Cross country, it would have probably been only maybe a mile and a half. To drive it to the roads, it would probably be about 3 miles if you drive on the haul roads and the coal roads to get there. But if you just trekked cross country, mile and a half, maybe 2.
Yeah, yeah. The how this show is it's a platform for people to share what they've experienced. As far as I'm concerned, there's no distinction between woo or whatever on this show, because we don't know exactly what it does and what it's capable of. So if the witness has experienced it, it can get out there on this, and I'm not shutting anything down. Like, I know some other platforms that might happen, but yeah, but we just don't, we don't know what it is yet. And different people report some really interesting things. Now, we already know that how this did affect the rest of your life is, it made you go into college in Eastern Kentucky and take these classes to study, apes and anthropology, archaeology. How quickly did that happen after you had this experience?
It didn't happen rapidly, because I'm a musician as well. So there was quite a bit of time between graduating high school and when I went back to get my degree, where I was just playing music. So there was probably about a 10-year time span between graduation and then actually going to college. And I actually tried to start the Kentucky Center for Bigfoot Research before I even went back to college. It was, well, this will give you an idea how long it was. I had a Yoohoo group page called Bigfoot in Kentucky. And I was looking for people who were a little bit more scientific minded. And I had quite a few people request to join the group, which I let everybody that wanted to be in it in, because, you know, that's how you find people. And there was a couple of guys that joined the group that did go on to do some higher profile things in the Bigfoot community, but they were a little bit more gung-ho about it at the time than I was, because I was looking for a certain mindset. And as to where these guys, they wanted to run straight out and just start researching right off the bat. You know, it's like meet them online on Friday and they wanted to go out squatching on Saturday. And that wasn't the mindset that I was looking for. So when I went back to college for the second time, because I got one degree right after I graduated from a trade school, and then I went back and got these degrees at EKU. And anyway, I'm getting off track. When I was in school and I was around the other anthropology majors, the biology majors, the people that were getting degrees to work in the forest element, our paths crossed a whole lot. And so I would always talk about this because I was never shy about it. And I had several of my professors told me not to, you know, do this publicly. As a matter of fact, one guy approached me back then about being in a book that he was writing. And I had mentioned that to one of my professors, and he told me definitely to stay away from it if I wanted a career at all. But now, like I said, I'm older now and I don't care. So anyway, in the course of meeting these other students, I found several that were very interested in the topic. And so when we actually officially formed the group, it was in 2002, I think, or thereabouts. And I think that's the right day. Anyway, when we actually formed the group, it was full of anthropologists, biologists, people with advanced degrees in the outdoors of some aspect. So everything was approached on a scientific level. It was very rare that we would just jump up and decide to run out to the woods. Everything was planned out. Everything was well organized. All the equipment was gathered. You know, checklists were made. The whole evening was planned. Weekend, however long it was planned out step by step. Everything that we were going to do. That's the way we approached it, and that's how the center come about.
That's good information for us to cover, though, because it does kind of get us down the timeline to show that, you know, I mean, for one, you were coming up against some really interesting figures. Even in your schooling, you had teachers that were trying to talk you out of it, which that's incredible to hear that. And you weren't even a teacher, you were just a student, and they're trying to talk you out of it.
Right. And you know, honestly, they were looking out for my best interest, you know, because at the time they didn't know which direction I was going to take my career. And if I wanted to actually, you know, study cultural anthropology or something on a major level, or get a doctorate and try to become a professor. I probably didn't want Sasquatch researcher glaring on my resume. Like, you know, there's a few of them out there now. Bendenagel, Krantz, Meldrum. You know, I'm sure they've all paid a heavy price for their involvement in the subject. I know Jeff has, or at least I'm pretty sure Jeff has. I won't say I know for certain, but yeah, there was a lot of obstacles, and the official roster for the group, there is one person on the whole roster that does not have an advanced degree, and that is because this person had a face-to-face encounter as well, and owns a large piece of property where there's quite a bit of Bigfoot activity periodically.
Sure.
And so we just kind of included her because she was always a good resource, and she was always someplace where we could go and do research if we didn't have a particular place picked out. But one of the funny things is we would go out and yeah, we would have things happen periodically, nothing with any consistency, until I got my son involved and some of his friends. And the first night I ever took them out, we had some of the most dramatic interactions that we've ever had as a research group. And he was, let's see, he had just turned 11 at the time, maybe 12. And him and three of his friends, you know, they were watching Finding Bigfoot and all that sort of stuff, and they wanted to go squatching. They just thought it would be just a blast to go. Well, I had gotten a email from a woman who had emailed the center, and there's an area here that is about 5 miles from our house. And she said that they had been run out of the woods by something screaming and throwing rocks at them. Now, this area, it's college land. There's several places that I'll mention in the recounting of some of this, but it's owned by Berea College, and it's a large reservoir. And people go out there and fish. They go out there and party. Teenagers go out there and park. You know, it's not a deserted area. It's remote, but it's not deserted, especially on the weekends. Now, through the week, it's pretty isolated. But he had some of his friends over, and it had been raining hard for 3 solid days. And this is February. In Kentucky, that's what we get in February. It's either snow or rain. And everything was pretty well flooded. But this particular day, it was the first full moon of February. And that plays an important factor. But it was the first full moon of February. It had finally quit raining. So I told the guys, I said, let's run out to the lake out here and we'll do some squatching. So I took them out there. There was 4 of us, me and the 3 boys. And we drove down to where this woman said that they were at. We had turned the truck around. Now we're parked on a paved road, mind you. It's a dead-end road, but it's a paved road. And we're at the end of it. We're right beside a long slough that runs up a holler of the lake. Now, the lake is up high out of its banks, and it's probably 250, 300 yards across from bank to bank at this slough. Well, we get there. Now, remember, this is just for the boys to have fun on. I didn't bring, parabolic mics, thermal cameras, none of that. They just wanted to go make noise and bang on trees like they do in the show. So we get there and I tell the boys, I say, you all know what you want to do. You know how to do it. Have fun. So we're standing there and they've done tree knocks and they've done their little howls and screams and stuff. And my son says, I'm going to do my famous 2 shorts and a long. And so he does this woo, woo, woo sound. And I'm standing there looking toward the other side of the lake. And like I said, it's a full moon, so it's bright. It's about 40, 43 degrees. It's pretty quiet. It's been raining for, like I said, the 3 days, so nothing's making any noise. Everything is soaked. But I'm standing there looking across the lake, and all at once, there is a rock that is arching through the air coming toward me from the other side of the lake. And it's somewhere between a large cantaloupe and a basketball. It's in between the two of them. And it comes from the other side through the air and hits the water about 20 to 30 yards from where I'm at. Now it hits the water and it goes deep. You get that bloop bloop sound of the water being shoved out of the way. The splash goes high in the air and rains down. And even if I hadn't have seen the rock, I would know that it was not a beaver tail smack, because when a beaver smacks the water, you get that smack sound. You don't get the bloop sound of the rock going deep. And you definitely don't get a heavy spray of water falling back down. So, but anyway, this happens. And of course, like I said, I'm not overly prepared. I've got a fairly good flashlight. It's a little bit foggy, but I've got a fairly good flashlight. I put the boys in the truck because I'm not sure what's fixing to happen, because I've never had anything like this happen before. Nothing being thrown at me like this. So they're in the truck and they're hanging out the windows like the Clampets, so I don't even know why they bothered to get in the truck. But I'm standing there and I hear almost what sounds like something go into the water, just like a canoe would make just the faintest sound of parting the water. No ripples, no wake, nothing like that, but you can almost tell that something is moving in the water. And then that kind of stops and I start hearing this clicking noise, like a tapping, like almost like that sound. And it's kind of got a rhythm to it. It's nowhere near that fast. It's more like kind of like that. But anyway, I'm shining my light around. I can't see anything at all. Can't pick out anything through the fog. Nothing in the tree line that we can see through with the flashlights. And eventually it just kind of, I don't know if it goes away or if it just stopped, but nothing else happened. And I was pretty much ready to head out by that point, because all I've got with me is a 9mm. Nothing to do battle with the Sasquatch with. So we leave. Now, the next day I contacted Bobo, James Fay, and I told him what had happened. And I asked him if he had ever encountered anything like that. And he said that he had heard that 2 other times. And he said it was a large male and it was mad, that I was right to leave with the boys, but to go back. And I said, okay, we'll go back. So we then spent the rest of that summer going back to this same location, other areas around the lake, and never had anything else happen again that whole summer. Not a howl, not a knock, not a pebble, not a pine cone, nothing. And so I'm just about to write the area off that it was just a fluke that happened that night. So fast forward to the following February. And remember, I said that it was the first full moon of February. So we go back out to our non-degreed members farm, which is about 2 hours from our house. And we go up there, and of course the guys think they're seasoned squatchers now. And we go up there, and we do hear some things. We pick up a very faint, what sounds like a howl through the parabolic mic. Some other stuff that was closer, but it was just weird sounds. Not any type of animal that I could identify. So anyway, we stay up there until about 2 o'clock in the morning, or 1 o'clock in the morning. And then we drive back to where we had the rock throwing incident at. And it's the same pickup truck. It's the same 4 guys in the pickup truck were parked in the exact same spot 1 year to the lunar date later. And we pull up, and of course we've been in the truck for an hour and a half at this point, and first thing we got to do is we all got to go to the bathroom. So we jump out and we're doing that. We haven't made a sound of any kind. And we have the exact same experience. We get another rock thrown at us. And my son and one of his friends saw this one coming from the other side of the lake. And he said I don't think it was as big as the one you described. He said it looked like a big cantaloupe to me. So it was probably a little bit littler, but they saw it coming and it landed in the water as well. And we hung around for about 30 minutes, and there was none of the other activity happened. None of the teeth clacking, nothing going in the water. There wasn't any howls. We initiated a few howls. We done a wood knock to start with. There was no response of any of that. We like to say that he just happened to be there and saw us and was like, "Hey, I remember you." And he threw a rock at us just kind of to say hi, and then just went on about his business. So that's kind of a intriguing one, I thought. So
I would agree with you. And I mean, those boys were probably, well, were they excited, or how did it affect them?
Oh, well, at the time, they were kind of freaked out.
Yeah.
But once I started the truck and we drove off, it was just like they were just bawling with excitement. They couldn't even sit still inside of the cab of the truck. They were all replaying the event, how they saw it, and correcting each other and collaborating with each other. It was pretty fun to watch how their 10, 11-year-old minds were working. But yeah, they were very excited about it. And then from that point on, they were gung-ho to go anytime we had enough time to drive out to the area. And like I said, we spent a lot of time out there that whole year, but didn't have anything happening, which they got a little discouraged a few times, because the first time out of the gate and you have a giant basketball-sized rocks thrown at you, it's kind of hard to be excited when you go out and you hear nothing.
Right.
Which
yeah.
now they know that's 90% of it is going out and not getting anything. It's like when I take them hunting, I'm like, there's a reason they call it hunting and not killing. You don't always get something. So that they understand that, but they are they are very much gung-ho for it. One of the boys, unfortunately, has moved off at this point, so it's just my son and the other kid that was with him. But we still go quite often. We have actually had a lot of other activity happen out there at this area, because we eventually started working our way around the entire lake, and we've had multiple rocks thrown at us since then. We have never experienced the teeth clacking since, but we've had multiple rocks. As a matter of fact, just a few months ago, we were out on the opposite side of the lake, and I was actually leaning up against the truck, and the boys are now 15 and 16 years old. So they've got a little braver, and they'll venture away from me a little bit. So they were about 100 yards down the road from the truck. And I'm sitting there leaned up against the truck, and all at once it was just like somebody picked up a handful of little fine road gravel particles and just threw them on my truck, because they just rained down on the truck. And it was nothing falling out of trees, because we were not parked under trees. It was a clear night again. It wasn't rain. It wasn't anything like that. There was nothing blowing gravel dust up against the truck, but a little fine particles of little tiny rocks just kind of peppered down in the bed area of the truck, or at least the side of the bed. We never found any sizable rock in the truck, but I was leaning right up against it when it happened, and they were 100 yards from the truck, and they heard it happen. So it's a pretty active area. Now, where I live is it's exactly 5 miles from my house to this lake. Some of the best audio recordings we've ever got, I've got right here in my backyard. Another researcher that I know, he went to an area that is called the Pinnacles in Berea, which is a large, or it's a fairly popular hiking trail, especially on the weekends. It climbs to about, I want to think, 3,000 feet, and people hike up all the time because of the view. He took 2 friends of his up to the top of the mountain, and it took them longer to get to the top than they thought it would. So by the time they had got done doing what they wanted to do at the top, it was getting dark on them. And if you really want to see his experience, it was on that TV show, These Woods Are Haunted. And I can't remember what the title of it was, but if you just research that, you'll come across it. They were basically escorted down the mountain by a few of these creatures. The TV show kind of plays it out like there was only 2 of them. He told me that when they hit the parking lot area at the bottom of the mountain, because there's a big forestry service building there, so there's a parking lot. He said when they hit the parking lot area, that the one that was closest to them let out a howl. And he said there was at least 5 others that howled all the way back up to the top of the hill, or at least what he believed to be was the top of the hill. But when I got the audio recordings that I got here in the backyard, the first one I sent it to him. And he said that it sounded just like the ones that was yelling at them at the Pinnacles. Now, kind of the reason I bring this up is because Where the Pinnacles is 5 miles from my house. The Pinnacles are 5 miles from the lake. So it's, I call it the Sasquatch Triangle because all legs of the distance between these 3 points are all 5 miles. And there is quite a bit of stuff that happens in that area. So, and plus it just kind of links all of it together and gives each one of them a little bit of more credibility and validation to their happening. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And also to add on even a little more credibility to all this, I mean, this whole area you're talking about is not that far away from Daniel Boone National Forest, correct?
Oh, no. It's, well, actually, where the lake is, I would consider, I mean, the college owns the property the lake is on, but just on the other side of this property is the Daniel Boone National Forest.
So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. There, where all of this is at is Madison County. There is no Daniel Boone Forest in Madison County, but the lake is right on the Jackson County line. As a matter of fact, if you left the lake and walked to the top of the mountain, that would be Jackson County. And all of that area up in there is Daniel Boone National Forest. And there's been quite a bit of stuff up there. The one person that we have that owns the large property, it is in Jackson County. As a matter of fact, when she had her encounter and saw the sheriff at that time for Jackson County saw one as well. And he, of course, reported it, and it was in the paper, and it made a kind of a big deal. And it actually wound up, as I see it, it wound up costing him re-election when it come time to run for sheriff again, because he had won it for several times, and then he reports seeing a Bigfoot, and he loses the very next one. So, but he said that he had a barn on his property, and he was walking by his kitchen window, and something caught his eye, and he said one of them jumped out of the top of his barn, out of the hayloft, and then run across the field. And there was 4 or 5 people. The sheriff and our team member, they live like 2 miles apart, and there was 4 or 5 people in that area that saw it. And they, when one of them comes around again, they start making phone calls. Hey, I seen this. Have you seen anything? And of course, when that happens, we know about it pretty quick, and we're up there trying to capture something on video or audio, but it's a little bit harder up there because the country is very, very rugged. It's hard to get around, especially in the dark. And during the summer, it's rattlesnake and copperhead heaven. So you got to be very careful.
Yeah, that's not a not a good time. I hear this year is supposed to be, I think it's even worse for snakes because of the cicadas. That might not be true. Yeah, that might just be a thing I read. But
I would say that's probably a fairly accurate statement.
Yeah.
I just hope this year is not as bad for ticks.
Oof, I know, right?
Because they were real bad last year. So
yeah, take tick stuff seriously. Anyone who's listening to this, because ticks can really mess you up.
We were doing a archaeology project in Florida one time, and when the team arrived on the site, it was the day before we were actually supposed to start. So we just went out to look at the mound area we were investigating, and we were just all in, tank tops and shorts and hikers. And there was 5 of us went out and looked, and we were out there probably 2 hours looking around, and we had over 200 ticks on us between the 5 of us in that 2 hours. When we got back to base camp, we pulled over 200 ticks off of us.
That's not cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was bad.
So how about this? Imagine that you are coming to the end of having your group together, and you're thinking of the last, all the years that you were able to do things in the field, and you're like, well, still can't believe we had that one thing happen that made it all worth it. Was there any experience that just really sticks out in your mind, like this was a pretty incredible experience that we were able to investigate or experience through this?
Um, if you take my encounter away,
Mm.
I would have to say that it was the first night I took the boys out.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the most dramatic one night we've ever had. I mean, we've had lots of stuff happen. We've had tree knocks, we've had rocks thrown, howls. We've had the whole gauntlet of stuff. We've found footprints. I've done gifting and had experiences with that. But that one night for the most amount of activity to happen in the shortest amount of time without the creature walking right up to us, it has to be that one night so far. Now we've got some pretty big adventures planned for this summer. We're going to go spend about 3 days at Peabody during the middle of the summer when there's not as much activity with hunters and stuff in the area. We're going to go down there, and we hope to go to LBL sometime this summer too, which is Land Between the Lakes, and that's in far western Kentucky.
Is there a way that people can keep up to date with what the group is doing in their research, or is it a thing where, if you catch certain shows where you're sharing, then that's how you're gonna find out what's going on with you guys?
Well, you can find us on Facebook. Of course, it's the Kentucky Center for Bigfoot Research, or they can go to my page, Gene Brock. That's liable to take them to my music page too, but they can go to either one of them, and they'll find ways to get to the Kentucky page if they can't find it for some reason. We get a lot of reports, but we don't report reports, so to speak. There's too many other places that are better at that than we would be, like the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization. Charlie, he takes a lot of reports. Of course, the guys like you and Wes that do the podcasts that are talk about reports and interview researchers. The BFRO, that's probably the best resource for reports. But when we have truly exciting things happen, we will make a post about it. Just because we heard a tree knock or something, we're not gonna report that, because we found a footprint in the mud. We're not going to report that. Now, if it was an extraordinary footprint or it was a trackway, we would probably report that. But just finding the odd report, we probably won't, or the odd footprint, we probably won't make a big post about it. I did find on an archaeology project one time, we had it was what we call a phase 3, which is where we're working in one spot, and we had the field, had a bulldozer come in and strip the topsoil off the field. and it was piled up in a pile at the end of the field. And I was walking around the pile, doing just kind of a surface survey, and I noticed 3 holes in the ground. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, because it almost kind of looked like a bowling ball. The 3 holes for the finger holes on a bowling ball. And so I was kind of standing there looking at that, and all at once I just kind of focused my attention to the left just a little bit, and I realized that there was a footprint in the mud there, and it was I immediately went into Bigfoot mode, and it was a 15-inch 5-toed track, and I got some detailed pictures of it. Of course, I didn't have any plaster of Paris or anything like that to attempt to make a cast out of it. But when I was down on my hands and knees doing my measurements and taking the pictures, when I went to get up, I put my hand down in the dirt and raised up, and I noticed that I was raising up with 3 of my fingers still on the ground. And it just kind of struck me, and I took my 3 fingers and I reached over and I put them in the 3 holes that were on the ground. And it was exactly, my fingers just slid right straight down the holes. I didn't have to move them, didn't have to adjust or anything. And I kind of think that for some reason, this individual had got down on, or had squatted down for some reason. Maybe we were coming in or something, but had raised up on those 3 fingers and drove them into the mud. The finger size was bigger than mine, quite substantially. And according to my ruler, they were about 1.5 inches longer than my fingers were. I could not reach the bottom of the holes. But it was almost like I was just putting my fingers down in the 3 holes that this individual had made in the mud. And I thought that was pretty cool. On that same archaeology project, we doing archaeology, when you do those phase 2 and 3s where you're in one spot, it's not really quiet. There's always somebody that wants to play music on their cell phone or something. The younger kids just can't enjoy the sound of nature, you know. But we would be working, and we would think that we would hear people talking in the woods, and we'd shut the radio off, and there would be nobody there, nobody walking back to the side or anything like that. But we would just hear things, and we would hear limbs break and just weird things, which that could easily have been the wind. But one day, one of the other team members had some oranges that were going bad, and she was going to throw them into the woods. And I said, no, let me have them. And I had 2 apples that I had taken from the hotel breakfast bar that morning and had put in my backpack. And so I took my knife and I poked holes in all 4 pieces. And what I had done, I took a stick and I slid an orange, 1 apple, the next apple, and then an orange on the other end. So the apples were in the center, bookended by an orange on both ends on this stick. And I took the stick and I laid it up in the crook of a tree, or the fork of a tree, probably 7 foot, maybe a little higher. I'm 6 foot, so reaching 7 foot is not a problem. It could have been a little bit higher than that. And just left them there. And the first day we come back, nothing had happened. I believe it was the following day after that when we come back, and they were still, the stick was still up in the tree, and I could see one of the oranges. So I pulled it down because it just looked it looked different than the way I had left it. And so I pulled it down to look to see if a squirrel or something had got onto it. And both apples were gone, but both oranges were still on the stick. And it was like, something had taken one of the oranges off, took both of the apples off, and then put the orange back on and put it back up in the tree. Because if squirrel wouldn't have ate the whole thing, I'm not even sure if squirrels eat apples or not. But birds, anything like that, they wouldn't have ate both the apples to where there was nothing there. So something had removed the two apples and put the orange back on. And I thought about that for quite a bit of time. And then I got to thinking that, we theorize that Sasquatches migrate, and I'm sure they do. But on the other end of the coin, I'm also sure that there's the individuals who are habitual to one area. They stay where they live because it has everything they need. And there was plenty of food, cover, water, and shelter all in this area. As a matter of fact, it was right below the Cumberland Dam on the Cumberland River where they released the trout. So there was an abundance of trout. But anyway, I got to thinking, and I thought, well, if this was a Kentucky born and bred Sasquatch, it had no idea what a orange in the wild was, because we don't have orange trees. We don't grow oranges in Kentucky, but we grow plenty of apples. So it knew what the apples were and knew it wanted the apples, but had no idea what to do with the oranges. That's kind of my hypothesis on it.
That's one of those weird experiences that really makes you wonder, man, you guys are really getting into some cool stuff down in Kentucky. And the more I hear about that state, I mean, I gotta check it out one day. I've driven through, but I gotta check out down there. But man, some wild stuff. Gene, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show and for sharing. I know it's just a little bit of what you've experienced over the years, but it's some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I could talk all night and cover lots of ground on stuff, but I hold some things kind of close because I don't want to muddy the waters, so to speak. That's another reason why we don't do a lot of, hey, we found this footprint, we heard this tree knock, because everybody's that studies this knows everything there is to know about a tree knock or a footprint. What do we add by saying, hey, we heard a tree knock last night?
Right.
So,
right.
And until we have a specimen on the table, it's kind of hard to put serious facts behind some of this stuff. We can theorize all day long, but anyway, I could rattle on all night. I get pretty long-winded sometimes, but I've definitely enjoyed being on your show.
It's been a fun one, Gene, and we'll definitely keep in touch with you. I want to make sure, in our last few minutes, just wanted to make sure, did you have any other closing thoughts you wanted to share? Or, we will definitely put the links to the Facebook page for you guys so that people can make sure that you go over and check that out as well.
Yeah, that would be great. The only thing I can add is if, anybody that encounters anything, I definitely recommend that they report it to whatever reporting website that they want to, so it's documented. But if it's in Kentucky or even some of the surrounding states, let us know about it too, because we might run out there and put some boots on the ground because if it happens pretty soon after the encounter, that's always a good thing. So, if we know about it, we can check it out. If we don't know about it, there ain't nothing we can do for you.
Absolutely.
So if anybody has anything that happens, they're more than welcome to reach out to me on any of my Facebook pages. I've got my personal, I've got the one for my music, and then I've got the Bigfoot page. So anybody's welcome to reach out on any of them platforms about Bigfoot or anything else to me. I'll talk to anybody about anything.
Well, there you go. Gene Brock, it's been fun chatting with you today. Thank you for coming on the show, and I think we'll definitely be keeping in touch. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good, buddy. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. I'll see you back next time, listeners. The Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one. If you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.